Hello everyone and welcome to Tech Unveiled. Did you know that global mobile networks only consume about 0.6% of the world's electricity? Still, that is 150 terawatt hours per year, equivalent of the annual electricity usage of Sweden. In this episode, we will show you how to scale 5G to meet the fourfolded traffic increase expected by 2025, while at the same time aiming to reduce the absolute network energy consumption. My name is Lena, and I will be your host. Now let's go behind the scenes and meet our experts. So with me here in the studio, I have Johan Hultell, expert in radio, and Michael Begley, expert in RAN compute. Welcome to Tech Unveiled.
Thank you.
So, Michael, already today, mobile networks enable reliable remote working. It also reduces the need for traveling and commuting, which of course have positive impact on our environment. But if we zoom in on the networks as such, why is energy efficiency so important?
You're absolutely correct. And indeed, with 5G, we are vastly more energy efficient compared to previous generations. So we greatly reduce the energy consumption per gigabyte delivered in the network. On the other hand, operators do globally spend about $25 billion on electricity each year.
That's a lot.
And as we cater for the data growth, if we simply add 5G to the radio access network without doing anything else, we will increase that number, we will increase that energy consumption.
So RAN power consumption is the most significant factor when it comes to energy efficiency. Johan, do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. The radio access network is really the key. And for a typical service provider, it represents more than 75% of the power consumption. And I think the reason is really rather simple. It is through the radio access network that the service provider builds nationwide coverage. And to build this coverage, you need several thousands of radio sites. If you compare that with the number of core nodes, which typically are a few, there can easily be a factor 10,000 more radios in the network. And this difference in numbers is really why the radio access network becomes such a dominant part.
That's a significant number. So what can we then do to help service providers when it comes to RAN energy efficiency?
Now, on a high level, it's rather simple. So we can take the car evolution as an example. If you look at modern cars today, they consume less fuel per kilometer. And when they approach a traffic light and stop, they turn off the engine. This is what we want to do for the radio access network as well. We want to make sure that we have energy efficient equipment on site, so we can deliver more data per consumed watt. We want to make sure that we turn off components when they are not needed, similarly as the cars. And thirdly, we want to use smart software functionality so that we can turn off frequency layers when they are not needed.
So let's dig deeper into this topic. More specifically then, how can service providers introduce 5G while at the same time minimize energy consumption? What do you say, Michael?
That's a great question. And there's three key elements, essentially. The first being we want to modernize the site with modern hardware that is both multi-purpose and more energy efficient. We want to dynamically control the energy consumption on the site through advanced software, as Johan mentioned. And we want to use the most energy efficient components possible on the site for delivering 5G and even legacy services.
Can you elaborate a bit on these key elements?
Absolutely. So if we start with the first one, we want to modernize a site. So if we go to a site and we only add equipment, we're only adding power consumption. But if we go to the site and we modernize the equipment, in other words, we add equipment that can also deliver, for example, LTE with multi-purpose hardware, we can modernize the legacy, make it more power efficient, but we also can use multi-purpose, multi-band radios, for example. So instead of having two single-band radios, one doing 60 watts and the other doing 60 watts, we can instead modernize our site with a single radio, let's say that does 80 watts, but then through dynamic power pooling, every millisecond, we can share the power, 80 watts, between the two different frequency bands. And because of the traffic profile, it's very, very, very rare that you would peak exactly in both bands in exactly the same millisecond.
Okay, so moving on then to the next element, the dynamic energy consumption. Johan, can you explain that for us?
Yes, absolutely. So handle that problem efficiently, we have developed integrated hardware-software architecture, which essentially allows us to take like super fast decisions that are holistic. So we can consider the entire site and we can consider the instantaneous traffic needs on the site. And this really helps service providers in 3 ways. First, it allows them to turn off hardware and components when they are not needed. And this we can really do like on a very fast level, so we can do it on the microsecond level, but we can also do it during longer time periods, such as during low traffic hours. And an example of the latter is when we introduced recently now for our massive MIMO radios deep sleep mode, then we were able to reduce the power consumption with up to 70%. So then the second way we help service providers is that we want to make sure that we move traffic to the most energy efficient band. And that typically means moving the traffic to the 5G bands. And by doing that, we can transfer more data per consumed watt and at the same time give end users a better experience. And then the third way that our architecture enables is really that we can have this to enable innovative software solutions like Ericsson Spectrum Sharing, which allow operators to run 4G and 5G on the same spectrum, on the same site and on the same hardware. And by doing that, we really offer a way to deploy nationwide 5G coverage without, as Mike was into, adding all of this additional hardware. So together, these 3 elements provide a very efficient way of giving high performance and having a low energy consumption per bit when used, and at the same time consuming very, very little when not needed.
Interesting. So we talked now about how Ericsson can enable energy efficiency both when deploying 5G, but also once the site is up and running. Now, Michael, you mentioned a third element, the energy efficiency component. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely, and energy efficient components goes across the site, everything from the power amplifiers to the site power equipment. But if I focus on one aspect, which are the compute requirements, if you look at the compute requirements for 5G compared to 4G, it's increased by a factor of 150 or more. It's an almost exponential processing growth in terms of the digital front end on the radio, the beamforming, and the layer 1 processing in both the radio and RAN compute. So how we address that within Ericsson is we have what we call Ericsson Silicon, and this is a system on a chip. It's a custom system on a chip, purpose-built to deliver data over radio access networks in the most efficient way possible. And if I just take one example, within RAN compute, we typically have about 30 to 60% lower energy consumption compared to the industry benchmark using Ericsson Silicon.
Wow. But Johan, can you give an example of when we have applied all 3 of these key elements?
Yes, absolutely. So we had a recent Vodafone trial where we together modernized an existing site. And on that site, we introduced our R3227, which is a 5G radio. And by doing this together with our software, we were able to reduce the power consumption with 50%. And I think in the end, the sentiment is really that there isn't a single silver bullet to address energy efficiency. We really need to attack it from all angles. We need efficient hardware, we need innovative software, and we also need to keep the holistic network view.
Great advice. Thank you, Johan, and thank you, Michael, for sharing your expertise with us here today. And thank you all for joining us. Should you want to know more about RAN energy efficiency, I can warmly recommend you to go to our site, ericsson.com/techunveiled. And I do hope to also see you back soon for new exciting episodes of Tech Unveiled. But until then, take care, stay safe, and bye for now.